Hey everyone! So, with the events that are currently happening in the Big Brother 24 house, I am recording this on the Wednesday. I thought it would be enlightening to go back in time and to look through the experiences that Black women or mixed women with Black ancestry had in the Big Brother house, pertaining race and all that other stuff, as well as how it played into the games, how they were treated, so on and so forth. So, the first person I'm going to discuss is Autumn from Big Brother 2. She didn't last long at all, she was the second boot, but there was still a lot of drama that involved her. It was briefly discussed in the episode, but there's a situation where Mike Boogie allegedly asked to sleep with her so she could vote with them to boot Nicole, and when she didn't agree to that, Chilltown essentially harassed her and hazed her, as they also made fun of her eating disorder, and I don't get why they decided to pick on her out of all people. Was it because they felt like she wasn't worth protecting? There was also kind of a lot of slut shaming that was happening in the Big Brother house at the time. And I remember even allies like Hardy and Nicole started bashing her a lot during her elimination week, as she was slut shamed, called emotional, thirsty, and it was just really awkward just watching everyone kind of just isolate and make fun of her. She literally had no one. And you notice throughout Big Brother that there's always this trend of Black women not being protected, or the house guest feeling like she shouldn't be protected. And now I'm going to move on to Monica from the very same season. Throughout the season, a lot of house guests acted like she was worthless, didn't do anything, and didn't deserve to win, because they felt like she wasn't worth it and she was kind of just a waste of space. There's also a lot of times where they acted like she was stupid and illiterate at various points throughout the season, kind of hinting that she was uneducated. I do remember in her final week, there was this argument that she had with Nicole about what quote unquote light skin is, and Nicole didn't really understand the nuances of why Monica, as a Black woman, would get offended at that, and Nicole kind of just laughed it off. She mentioned several times that she had to tone down her personality so she wouldn't be seen as loud or ghetto, since if she was her normal personality, she would have been booted a long time ago. When she would make comments about saying that a Black girl wasn't going to win, the house guests didn't understand where she was coming from, and it was just very awkward to watch at times. It seemed like things didn't really turn around for her, unfortunately, until her cousin was murdered in 9/11. And even when she won the HOH in the Final Four, people didn't really think of it as a big deal since she made the obvious move. So many others said ridiculous things or didn't make sense a lot of the time, but it was Monica that was always pointed out for it. Now we're going to move on to Danielle from Big Brother 3. She was immediately on the outs, while most of the pretty white people aligned with one another in the first few weeks. I think this was partially because she was quote unquote older. Not that she was older, but because she was a mother, and people tend to see mothers as older in this warped way. And it also didn't help that Marcellus, the only other Black person, was targeted to go home, and there's a whole discussion about that in the Big Brother 3 house that ended up happening. I remember there's a situation in the final six where Roddy was nominated by Marcellus, and he approaches Danielle and Marcellus to pretty much question and haze them. He started mansplaining them and talking to them like they were stupid, how they didn't understand, and I was very uncomfortable to watch. Like he thought they were lesser than for whatever reason, and how he didn't deserve to be treated this way, and he just had this superiority with them. And I remember Marcellus even called it out in the diary room, where it just looked bad that this white man was treating these two Black house guests like they were really stupid. And of course, there's the discourse in the final two, which could be interpreted as Misogynoir, as she played the game, she outplayed everyone. Most of the house guests loved her while she was in the house, but she didn't get a single vote outside of Jason, and they kind of villainized her for playing the game. I know many people interpreted it as this and compared her game to Dr. Wells in the prior season, where he was praised for playing this way. There's a whole discourse about it that is still discussed today, and was a huge factor as to why the cookout was formed to begin with. I could go on and on and on about this situation. I'm going to move on to Amanda from Big Brother 4, and honestly, there really isn't much to say here. The only thing that I could really catch was Nathan continuously mentioning that Amanda was untrustworthy as he targeted her, while she did nothing that indicated as such, and she did seem like someone who would be loyal to those who were loyal to her. She didn't do anything that was deemed untrustworthy, sneaky, so on and so forth. The quote-unquote untrustworthy word tends to go around on Black House guests for little to no reason, even when it doesn't fit, but it didn't seem like many people took the time to get to know her, and she was immediately outcasted. Especially with all the slurs and stuff that were said in the season, it was probably for the best that she did leave first. So we skip a few years and a few seasons, and we're going to go back to Danielle, but in Big Brother 7. The main thing that she had to do in this season was play herself down, which meant toning down not only her gameplay, but her personality, especially due to the events that happened in Big Brother 3, and how much hatred she got for it. A lot of Black house guests, especially women house guests, have to tone down their personality to avoid stereotypes and tropes, and she didn't want to be villainized like she was in her last season. There was the event that caused her to be nominated and how she reacted very emotionally to Erica, where she was very mad at her for thinking about nominating her. No, Erica pretty much told Danielle that she was nominated to her, and Danielle was locked out of the HOH room as she wanted to talk to Erica one more time, and everyone kind of made her look like she was crazy when she didn't really act that crazy. She was just emotional, she was in her feelings, and she couldn't believe that something so stupid was happening to her. Just watching that all happen was kind of uncomfortable. And of course, when a Black person shows their feelings, they're always deemed as crazy, emotional, so on, so forth, and it was always made to seem negative. So we're going to move on to a season and talk about Jameka from Big Brother 8. She did talk about how uncomfortable it was for her to be in the house as the only Black woman and the only Black person in general, especially since she wasn't brought up in an area with a lot of white people. From what they showed on the episodes, it seemed like everyone kind of understood this, but the fact that she even had to discuss it showed how she felt entering the game and within the first few weeks. Of course, Evil Dick used her religion as an attack when she did not vote out Eric, which he wanted to in week 5, and he kept making fun of it. Religion is generally always seen as a huge thing with the Black house guests in Big Brother, which I think is heavily pushed by production and the network, but is never seen as such a huge thing in other ethnicities or races. When you think of the church and when you think of gospel and all the stereotypes that comes with it, usually Black people come up. So the fact that he kept on picking at her religion was not the best look. Jameka is also another person who had to tone down herself and her personality in order to make it far, and she tried her best to not play into the quote-unquote angry Black woman stereotype. So we are going to skip 2 seasons and go to the next year with Libra from Big Brother 10. And this is a big one, but I don't really see many people talk about it overall. So one of the first things that I noted was that Steven called her the colored girl, like we were in 1945, instead of calling her by her name. Jerry also made a lot of suspicious comments against Libra that was definitely rooted in some microaggressions. So the entire house acted like she was this quote-unquote mastermind, and everything that happened in the house was blamed on her, and they were all obsessed with evicting her when Libra wasn't doing anything any differently than most of the other house guests. The house guests continuously called her a bad mother for doing the show, and called her a bunch of curse words and slurs. She was constantly gaslit in several arguments, and no one felt bad for her, no one protected her, no one really understood her side. And whenever there was an argument, they went to her. When the house did flip on Jessie, why was she the main one that was being attacked by the other side when there were 3 other people who voted that way? But it was mainly Libra who caught all the smoke. Abel pulled out the motherhood card, claiming that Libra swore on her kid and broke it, which Libra claims she didn't, and Ollie called Libra a scallywag, with Jerry and Michelle also yelling a bunch of nasty things about her and to her, which continued throughout a majority of the week. And there was the feast fight, where Libra made a joke and the entire house, mainly the woman, turned it into something that it wasn't. Keisha used her victim tears that she consistently used against Libra, even going back into the second week, which finally caused her to have a meltdown. Of course, they didn't really show most of this argument on the feeds. It was mainly just Libra being consistently gaslit by Michelle, and April kind of throwing in her side comments as well. And it got so bad to the point where she started breathing heavily and wanted to go into the diary room. And Keisha was also cursing Libra out as well. Libra could not win under any circumstances. She really had no one in her corner, and there was clearly a lot of misogynoir that she dealt with throughout the entire season that goes underreported. So we're going to move on to a season and discuss Chima. So the predominantly Caucasian side of the house decided to target her the very first week, since she was quote-unquote dramatic, though most, if not all the drama that happened in that week did not involve her. Of course, this is the same side of the house that acted like Chima had absolutely no right to be mad about her HOH being dismantled by nothing of her own doing and gaslit her about it. She was called a quote-unquote loudmouth, which she not necessarily wasn't a loudmouth, but most of the cast were loudmouths in that season, but they only called her that. And a bunch of other microaggressions were thrown at her, like some of the house guests that didn't fit the description. And all of this happened before Microphone Gate. I also want to state that Chima is very problematic in other ways, and she definitely contributed some unwarranted racism against Russell. So I just wanted to bring that into conversation so people aren't acting like I'm excusing everything she did as well. So we're going to move on to a season and discuss Monet. The one thing that I remember of her since she was booted second is I remember the house guests acting like she was so immature, loud, and catty in comparison to the other woman in the house, especially compared to Brittany, who was just as bad, if not worse. I even see a lot of the fans to this date still act like Monet was the devil for doing what she did, but everything Brittany did was excused. So we're going to move on to Kalia, and before the cookout, she was the last black woman who did really well in the competition of Big Brother. The veterans mansplained to Kalia a lot, especially during the week 3 mess that happened, like she was the main one who was behind the plan to save Dominique and to get rid of Jeff, when that wasn't even the case. Seeing Brendan mainly talk to her and demean her like she was stupid, which is a recurring theme with how people deal with black women in the house, really made me uncomfortable during their exchange. So the entire house saw her as a Danielle minion throughout the entire season, like she was not able to make her own moves for herself. It just so happened to have aligned with what Danielle wanted as well, since most of the house was against the both of them. Even people like Jordan had the nerve to say this and demean her when she literally made a move on her own HOH against Cassie that Jordan didn't even want to do. No matter what Kalia did, she never got the credit for it, and even in the jury roundtable, Shelly and the others were demeaning everything she did, and it was just very saddening to watch. So we're going to move on to Jodi, and of course she was only there for a day. But the fact that she was only there for a day brings an interesting discussion. She was not chosen by any of the coaches and was forced to be on Dan's team. So the coaches didn't choose her because she was older, she wasn't bone thin and black, or whether those weren't the outright reasons, they definitely played a factor into why they didn't choose her. When they lost, Dan of course evicted Jodi out of all of them. Clearly her being an older black woman played a part in her day 1 eviction. We are moving on to Candice from Big Brother 15, and this is easily the biggest case of racism that Black and mixed women have faced in Big Brother history. And honestly, I don't even want to go over all of this, and I probably can't even go over all of it, even if I wanted to. I don't really feel the need to go too deep in this one. Because Candice was a pageant girl and quote unquote didn't speak like a Black girl, the house thought she was fake and immediately was put on the outs as she was nominated in the first week and wasn't brought into any other alliances. A bunch of racist slurs, microaggressions, and outright macroaggressions were displayed by most of the house guests. Obviously, everyone talks about Bedgate, and they rightfully do talk about that horrible display of actions, where they targeted her bed when she wasn't even the main reason why the group of Gina Marie, Caitlin, Aaron, and Jeremy were upset to begin with. And of course, Amanda using racial slurs against Candice in her final week during the veto competition. Even beyond what was shown, her skin color and being associated with being dirty, as well as her hair, came up, and calling her unhygienic due to it. Her being biracial was used as an attack, as they wanted to quote-unquote see the quote-unquote Black side to come out, and how she wasn't quote-unquote white enough, which Spencer made some comments along those lines as well. She was left out of several alliances, and no one even really came out to defend her throughout the season, because it would hurt their game to defend and stop racism. Technically, they did defend racism because they didn't stop it from happening. So now we're going to move on to Amber from Big Brother 16. So we have Nicole and Christine claim that she is quote-unquote scary and intimidating for little to no reason and immediately dislike her, despite Amber trying to help them out at several points, and she's one of the nicest and least intimidating people to have ever been on Big Brother, but she automatically received those microaggressions that Black women are consistently given. People like Zach felt the need to berate her for something that didn't even happen, and Hayden felt comfortable in mentioning how much he wanted to harm her, though she did nothing to either one of them either. Most of the cast thought she was fake because she was timid and well-spoken and claimed that she was playing Caleb, knowing that it wasn't the case and that he was delusional. It was like they couldn't believe that a mixed woman could be well-spoken or timid or just genuinely nice. There was always so much aggression pertaining how the house guests talked to and about her, but never treated any other woman or any other man like that in the season, and it was like they didn't believe someone could act like her if she was Black or biracial. Seeing the other glee they had in isolating and evicting her was just very uncomfortable to watch. So moving on to Jocasta from the same season. I just remember the cast not really taking her seriously whatsoever and saw her as expendable. It does not help that her religion was made as a joke in the edit, and she was clearly cast to be the Black religious girl, and they also used her to push sassy diary rooms, though Jocasta was not sassy or stereotypical in that lens throughout the house whatsoever. So we are going to talk about Devon in her first 2 seasons, and of course I'm going to split them both up. So, in Big Brother 17, a lot of the cast talked about her being a mother and how she should not have left her kid to be in the house, though her family was fine with it, so I don't know why any of them cared. It clearly was something they used to attack her. I remember during her very first argument, where she was walking around the house and Clay, Shelly, and Jeff thought it was very suspicious, though it is something that everyone in the house does, in past seasons, in future seasons, and in this season. They clearly think Devon is up to no good and can't be trusted. Why do they think that she can't be trusted? Is it because she's Black? Like, why? Her walking around and minding her own business isn't scary or untrustworthy, which is something that Black people consistently have to deal with in everyday life. This led to the fight with Clay, and she ended up crying because she knows how this is going to come across. Also, for some reason, Audrey's shadiness as a game player were forgiven by the entire cast. Actually, no, not the entire cast, but one side of the house. But Devon was held to task and seen as the leader of an alliance, which wasn't even the case, and they acted like she didn't deserve her retribution. Even when she was on the block, her own allies didn't really fight for her like that and thought that she was kind of worthless in that way, so she wasn't protected like almost everyone else in the house was protected, so she was seen as expendable. So moving on to her journey in Big Brother 18. When she was assaulted by Frank, most of the house guests didn't even reprimand him and claimed that she was overreacting to the situation. This was even how a lot of fans reacted to it. She just recently stated a few days ago that production apparently didn't give him a warning or a punishment, and the diary room that we saw on the episode about this matter, she thought was an off-table venting session that the house guests go through. So the fact is that most of the house guests didn't think that she was worth protecting as a black woman, or that she was too tough enough to handle it on her own, or she was overreacting to it. Black trauma is always seen as something that isn't taken seriously amongst many others, and it's sad that even production lent into this. And of course, we had people like Nicole and Corey, but mainly Nicole, who continuously called her scary, intimidating, untrustworthy, so on and so forth. And the fact that the house felt the need to backdoor her for some reason, despite her very poor competition results, was ridiculous in my opinion. So we're going to move on to Zakiyah from the very same season. Her entire relationship with Polly to me seemed like she was just supposed to be pretty and none of her opinions were supposed to matter. Everyone else saw her as extremely expendable, and she was also harassed by Frank. But that wasn't in the episode. Nicole pulled off the same BS that she did with Devon about Zakiyah being scary and intimidating, even when Zakiyah did not fit any of those traits and she did nothing to be seen as scary or intimidating or untrustworthy. So we are going to move on to Dominique from Big Brother 19. Her eviction week is still one of the oddest things that I have ever witnessed on the show. Everyone turned on her so quickly, despite her being allies with a majority of them, and they started acting like she was crazy, made fun of her religion, and claimed that she talked in riddles and couldn't communicate at all, despite her being very well spoken. And of course, there was the blackface scandal that production had to shut down. And if production didn't shut down, they would have continued hazing, harassing, and taunting her, with that being one of the tactics. Of course, several people confronted her in this season and also alienated her like she was an outcast who didn't deserve retribution or comfort. So we are going to move on to Bayleigh from Big Brother 20. Of course, there was that black skin controversy with Rachel and Angela that took place and production gave them a warning about. Personally, the main thing that I remember pertaining to her in the season is that Angela, as the HOH, went out of her way to tell Bayleigh that she wanted her to be the first black winner of Big Brother, while Angela had already planned to send Bayleigh home that week. Just very unnecessary and mean gaslighting. So we are going to move on to Kemi from Big Brother 21, and despite being a competitor for 2 weeks and being in the house for about 3.5 weeks, she received some of the worst treatment in the house. Do I even need to go into the details about this? I remember a lot of the cast accusing her of stealing clothes, mainly Catherine, despite Kemi never doing that. People like Christine claiming that Kemi is a bad person, she's crazy, so on, so forth, and a bunch of other microaggressions. And the Jacksons also made a lot of aggressive comments about her, which were just unfounded since there was nothing aggressive about her at all, and they never spoke this way about anyone else. There was a lot of physical comments that were made about her as well. Of course, there was Bella, who sold Kemi out at every opportunity possible and did her quote-unquote hand-waving thing or whatever to mock Kemi while they were arguing. And of course, with the Camp Comeback twist, she was isolated by the entire house by order of Jack, and it just wasn't a good look. We also had production encouraging her to make sassy hand-waving confessionals, which she refused to do, and which is what I believe they convinced Jocasta to do a few seasons prior. So now we're going to move on to Bayleigh and Devon from Big Brother All-Stars 2, and they are both kind of treated the same way in this regard. I remember Nicole and Danielle making fun of Devon's fibroids, if I remember correctly, on the feeds, and everyone immediately lumping them together, like they were not their own people, with their own connections and their own strategy, but they were just seen as a package. One of the reasons why Bayleigh wasn't brought into the main alliance, which Memphis wanted, was because Danielle and Nicole told him that she and Devon are a package deal, so they didn't even respect Bayleigh as her own person to include her on her own. It's clear that this was mainly done because they were both black women, since every other pairs in that season and in that house were still seen as their own individuals. Of course, there was the whole Black Lives Matter situation, where Tyler wants to quit the show to be with Angela since it was the last round before sequester. He tells Devon and Bayleigh, unprompted on their end, that he wants to save them and he's here for the cause, bringing up the Black Lives Matter situation that he brought up, not them. Once he changed his mind with Christmas and production's help, no one told them and made them look stupid at the veto ceremony. This would lead to the fight with Christmas, Devon, and Bayleigh, where Devon ends up crying because Christmas is allowed to be aggressive, but she can't. She clearly felt pent-up frustration from 3 seasons and trying not to be seen as the quote-unquote ghetto black girl stereotype, but she felt like she was consistently pushed and prodded, which even Bayleigh fell into during that entire week, as they were both kind of ostracized as well. So with all of this history in the Big Brother house, it's no surprise as to why Azah, Hannah, and Tiffany wanted to be a part of the cookout, and even they dealt with their own situations. I remember Brent was consistently pushing that Azah was aggressive, and even some of the other people in the house, and some were even in the cookout, pushed this narrative as well, which pissed her off, and Azah has stated that she had to dim herself down and to go out of her way to not have that impression. Of course, when we got to the final 6, the cookout, mainly the men of the cookout, felt that Tiffany was not deserving of being a representation of a winner of their season, and we clearly know that they felt like this because they felt like she was quote-unquote unfiltered, quote-unquote ghetto, quote-unquote wasn't sophisticated enough. That's clearly what they were going with. And of course, Hannah had to be quiet when she was essentially being borderline harassed with the excessive flirting that Brent gave her, but she felt like she couldn't speak up about it because it would have affected her game. I'm just going to mention Big Brother over the top, and I remember literally as soon as Danielle walked into the house, most of the girls immediately hated her, and she didn't even do anything. They thought she was stuck up, they thought she was snotty. It was clear that they were very intimidated by this mixed woman who was being friendly at this point, but they refused to give her a chance, and that just, in my opinion, came off like they judged her based off of her race and based off of her being a confident mixed woman. So, of course, entering Big Brother 24 and seeing how Taylor is being treated, it's a conglomeration and an amalgamation of all the ways all these other women have been treated over the last 21 years, and nothing's really changed. And it's even worse because you have a lot of the Black House guests going with this narrative because they don't want to be seen as another cookout, especially in the season after the cookout thrived. It's all just very uncomfortable to watch. And them going to Monet and using him as the quote-unquote token black person is just really effed up. So this is the history of how black and mixed women have been treated in the Big Brother US house over the last 2 decades. And it's sad that in a lot of ways, nothing has changed. They are either seen as expendable, aggressive, uneducated, not worth protecting, not worth valuing, and it's just very sad to see, and a lot of people gaslight others who call it out. So with all this in mind, I just wanted to bring a historical element as to what's currently going on in the Big Brother house as I'm recording this on Wednesday. Thank you all for watching and listening, and hopefully you took something good out of this video.